Hey guys, tonight we take a dusty detour into the unforgiving reality of the American Wild West in the 1870s. No cowboys kissing sunsets, no epic standoffs with morally conflicted outlaws. Just you, dropped square into a world built on sweat, grit, and a truly appalling lack of indoor plumbing. The land stretches as far as the eye can see, flat, dry, and cracked like an old boot. You smell dust. Everything smells like dust. The horizon blurs in the heat. You swat a fly off your brow, but there are 10 more waiting their turn. You're a settler now. Sort of. You were lured here by dreams of land, gold, or maybe just escaping the factory floor. But this isn't anything close to the brochures. The frontier is lonely, chaotic, and dangerous. You have neighbors, technically, but they're miles away, and they probably have shotguns. There's no grocery store, no doctor, and no one to hear you scream if a cougar drags you into the bushes. Spoiler, one probably will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your location and what time it is where you're watching. This is kind of a global sleepover after all. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake at sunrise in a mud-chinked shack barely holding itself together. A blanket made of burlap covers your shivering form, though blanket might be generous. The wooden floor is uneven and creaks like it resents your weight. Mice have nibbled on the soles of your boots while you slept, and you may or may not be developing scurvy. You step outside and inhale the fresh air, which smells mostly of manure and a hint of gunpowder. This land is supposed to be opportunity, but opportunity's already coughing up blood from the dust. The American frontier is expanding, sure, but it's doing so with violence and entropy. Settlers compete with nature, with each other, and often with the very people they've displaced. Native American tribes have already been pushed westward multiple times, and tensions bubble like sour milk. Historians still argue whether this westward surge was manifest destiny or a full-scale campaign of conquest. Probably both. You're a minor character in that epic, and the script does not include dental care. Your day begins not with coffee, but with a cracked tin cup of lukewarm water and the vague hope that it's not carrying cholera. The well is unreliable, and the nearest river is 50 miles away and probably full of livestock runoff. You eat a breakfast of hardtack and salt pork, so leathery it should come with a chew toy. There's no variety, no seasoning, and definitely no oat milk. But if you want to keep that faint pulse going, you chew. Physical labor is mandatory. Whether you're a farmer, a miner, or a ranch hand, you will sweat. The Western climate doesn't care about your skincare routine. Summers are brutal. Winters freeze your marrow. You trudge through waist-high grass only to realize you've stepped on a nest of ticks. You think about the comfort of a bath, but there's no indoor plumbing, just a bucket and hope. Isolation adds insult to injury. You may not speak to another human all week unless you count yelling at a mule. Your neighbors are distant, both physically and emotionally. Towns exist, yes, but they're little more than a saloon, a general store, and a vaguely sober sheriff. You'll visit when supplies run out, or when someone gets shot over a poker game with no cards. And that's just this week. Still, against all odds, you're here. Welcome to the frontier, where dreams go to die and occasionally get dysentery.
The cold punches you awake, not gently, not politely. It punches you like a jealous ex with frostbite. You're inside your frontier home, though calling it a home might be a stretch. It's more a glorified splinter collection held together by desperation and mud. The roof leaks when it rains, groans when it snows, and offers zero apologies. You sit up, shivering. The fire you struggled to keep alive last night has long since wheezed out. Your breath fogs in the morning air, and you can literally see your own misery. You're sleeping on a straw mattress that smells like a goat had regrets on it. Your blanket? That's just a moth convention with commitment issues. And now something scratches behind the walls. Mouse? Bat? Demon? You don't really care. You have bigger problems, like how not to die before lunch. You step outside, and immediately the chill slaps your cheeks. Your nose starts leaking like it's trying to escape the experience. The yard is a mud pit. The outhouse is listing to one side like a drunk pirate ship, and the smell of manure somehow makes it past your clogged sinuses. Breakfast? You scoop some grits into a wooden bowl, already crunchy from yesterday's leftovers. It's cold, bland, and vaguely tastes like sorrow. Sanitation in the Wild West is less rustic charm and more death waiting patiently. You bathe maybe once a week with water hauled in from a sketchy well that probably doubles as a raccoon jacuzzi. You brush your teeth, assuming you even have a brush, with salt and charcoal, which sounds trendy now, but here it's a desperate bid to avoid dental disasters. Spoiler, you still lose most of your molars by age 30. Your cabin is home to more than just your sweaty family. Termites chew through the beams, rats scurry like they own the place, and spiders string webs like ominous party decorations. A stray dog sniffs around the yard. You hope it's a dog. You're too tired to verify. There's a pan on the stove, but the stove is just a metal box you yell at until it warms up. You fry some salt pork. It pops and sizzles, but it's more fat than meat. If you're lucky, no maggots. If you're not, well, extra protein. Historians still argue whether early settlers understood the importance of hygiene or simply gave up and embraced the filth. Either way, your intestines are on a roller coaster of regret. Your cabin's interior design? Functional depression. One room, 2 beds, a shelf of tools, and a table that wobbles like it's emotionally unstable. There's no privacy. If you want to cry, everyone hears it. The walls are thin enough that your neighbor sneezing in the next shack could startle you into dropping your spoon. And let's talk about sickness. You already feel feverish. Is it the stew you ate last night? The bugs crawling on the windowsill? Or the mold growing on the corner wall like it's auditioning for Broadway? Diseases spread fast. You hear about a nearby family that coughed once and were buried 2 days later. Smallpox and measles travel like gossip, quick and ruthless. Now, if you're a child, good luck. Childhood in the Wild West is short, loud, and usually ends with dysentery. Toys? Maybe a carved stick. Playtime? Helping mom scrub laundry in icy water while catching frostbite. Education? Only if your town has a schoolhouse. And even then, it's 1 room, 1 teacher, and 30 kids learning math while avoiding rabid squirrels. And if you're a woman, your morning routine includes cooking, cleaning, sewing, tending to animals, and possibly giving birth in a corner while someone milks a cow. Pain relief? Bite this leather strap and scream internally. Still, amidst all this chaos, there are tiny wins. A warm patch of sun on your back, a child's giggle, a neighbor who drops off a biscuit and doesn't rob you. They say humanity thrives on hope, and yours is barely clinging to a crooked nail above the fireplace. You glance around your shack once more. This is survival, not living. You wouldn't last one day here, and you're not even halfway through breakfast.
You grab a rusted bucket and stagger out the door. It's morning chore time, a phrase that sounds quaint until you live it. Every bone in your body groans. Your muscles feel like they were replaced with soggy rope. But here in the Wild West, rest is reserved for the dead. And even they probably had a rough final chore. Your first task? Water. There's no plumbing, no tap, no comforting hum of an electric pump. Your nearest water source is a shallow, murky well that looks more like a mosquito breeding ground than a font of hydration. You lower the bucket slowly, hoping it doesn't snap off or come back with something swimming in it. You strain lifting it. Your reward is a few gallons of liquid that may or may not be safe. Historians still argue whether most settlers boiled their water or simply risked diarrhea as a lifestyle choice. Then, you lug that sloshy weight back across uneven ground. The path is a chaos of mud, rocks, and vaguely angry geese. You trip once, catch yourself, but not before some of the water escapes, like it's trying to find a better frontier experience. Next, you feed the animals. If you have chickens, they hate you. Pigs, they scream like banshees with appetite. Horses, temperamental, huge, and deeply judgmental. They can tell you're a city slicker imposter. You sprinkle out corn, scrape together hay, and try not to get pecked, kicked, or emotionally wounded. One chicken keeps eyeing your boot like it owes it money. Then comes the manure. It's everywhere. Under your nails, on your clothes, somehow in your hair. You shovel it, slowly, precisely, bitterly. Not because you enjoy the smell, but because you don't want to invite rats or disease into your already doomed shack. You once dreamed of working in an office. Now your office is a swamp of excrement and resentment. Time for repairs. Fences break. Roof shingles fall. Tools rust. You squint into the sun as you hammer wood planks that were warped when you found them. There's no Lowe's, no online tutorial, no customer service. Just your own instincts. And maybe a neighbor named Hank who builds like he's blindfolded. But hey, he means well. Still, it's not all doom. You find a moment, just one, when you patch the chicken coop and a breeze rustles through the prairie. It smells faintly of sage. You think, maybe I'm okay. Then a tumbleweed smacks you in the face. That's the West keeping you humble. Want food? You're going to earn it. You head to the cellar for supplies, and you swear something scurries past your feet. You light a lantern, the potatoes are sprouting eyes, the flowers infested with weevils, and a jar labeled jam is probably just regret. You pick the least offensive option and head back up, trying not to breathe too deeply. Lunch? Beans. Always beans. The same beans you had yesterday and the day before. Some folks used to joke, beans are the frontier's love language. Those folks now have indigestion and trust issues. You spoon your portion, savor the blandness, and hope your digestive system hasn't filed for resignation. But perhaps the most terrifying part of your daily grind is the casual danger. You cut firewood, your hand slips. You climb the roof, you nearly fall. You wrangle a wayward goat, it headbutts you into next Tuesday. There's no OSHA here. Safety is a concept, not a reality. You stub your toe on a rock. It bleeds. You shrug. Infection? Maybe. Medical help? Hours away. And probably drunk. You cover it with a rag, whisper sweet nothings to your tetanus shot that doesn't exist, and hobble onward. And the children? They help. Kind of. One milks a cow, another chases chickens, and the third eats dirt with suspicious enthusiasm. You supervise like a referee at a medieval sport, trying to prevent injury and existential crisis. As dusk creeps closer, you look around at your handiwork. Barely functional chores, semi-fed animals, and the yard that smells vaguely like apocalypse. You survived. Technically. But you're already sore, dirty, and wondering why no one told you the West was basically a survival challenge with bonus dysentery. Modern folks complain about Mondays. You just faced a Tuesday with pitchforks and poop.
You step outside, hoping for peace. What greets you is pure chaos, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. The Wild West doesn't ease you in. It throws nature at your face like a weather-themed slapstick routine. The sun burns down with the fury of 10 angry ancestors. Your boots crunch over cracked soil that hasn't felt water since last year's Sorrow Festival. You hear buzzing, and it's not bees. It's mosquitoes the size of small helicopters. One lands on your arm and steals half your optimism. The air is dry. It tastes like dusty toast. No clouds, no relief. Just a sky so bright that it makes your eyeballs want a refund. You squint toward the horizon and something moves. A snake? A coyote? A strong breeze carrying tumbleweed and despair? Nope, just your luck. A rattlesnake, coiled and judging you. You freeze. Slowly back away. There's no antivenom nearby, and the local remedy involves whiskey and screaming. Historians still argue whether frontier folk developed effective treatments or just built a tolerance for pain through sheer exposure. Either way, you don't want today's highlight to be bitten before brunch. Storms come out of nowhere. One moment it's blistering sun, the next you're dodging hailstones like angry marbles. Lightning cracks in the distance, and you remember that your cabin's roof is basically kindling. You run back inside, ducking flying debris and cursing weather for its lack of subtlety. And let's not forget the local fauna. Prairie dogs dig holes that twist your ankle. Badgers glare from under porches with murder in their eyes. Coyotes howl at night, not poetic wails, but screechy tantrums that make you reconsider life choices. One raccoon raids your food stash and leaves a rude note in crumbs. Oh, and bugs. So many bugs. Grasshoppers clatter against your windows, spiders squat in your boots, and flies form social circles on your stew. Your frontier life is now an all-you-can-eat buffet for insects. You swat, slap, hiss, and eventually give up, choosing resignation as your survival strategy. Allergies? Too bad. Hay fever, stings, and mystery rashes are part of the package. There's no antihistamine, no soothing balm, just your own tolerance, and maybe a poultice made from crushed weeds and stubbornness. You hike through brush, hoping to check the trapline. Your boots fill with dust, sweat pools under your hat, and every branch tries to poke you like an annoying sibling. You find your trap, empty except for a half-eaten squirrel and disappointment. Maybe tomorrow. Nature also doesn't care about your mental health. The relentless exposure wears you down. Each day is a performance in pain management and pest control. And don't romanticize the scenery too much. Sure, sunsets can be stunning, but you're usually too busy fixing a fence or burying something to appreciate them. Even natural beauty has a cost. Floods rivers, cliffs crumble, forests burn, and the landscape itself can turn on you. Thorns, cacti, uneven terrain that destroys your ankles and faith in footwear. You once heard that pioneers adapted to the land. Maybe they did. Or maybe they just screamed internally while pretending to cope. Here's your quirky tidbit for today. Some settlers swore by crocodile dung as sunscreen. Yep, that was a thing. Probably didn't work, but desperation breeds creativity and poor decision-making. So you trudge back, clothes covered in dust, boots filled with angry burrs, and a sunburn that's going to look like modern art by nightfall. You dream of showers, SPF 50, and bug zappers. But this is the Wild West. Comfort is a luxury, and survival means making peace with nature's daily slap in the face. You wouldn't last a day, and right now, you barely lasted the afternoon.
You decide to make a supply run to town, which sounds simple until you realize it's 10 miles through terrain actively trying to murder you. There's no Uber, no paved road, no guarantee you'll make it back with all your limbs or livestock. You saddle up your horse, who clearly resents you, and set off into the great "maybe I'll survive" unknown. The path is dry and winding, flanked by scrub brush and distant silhouettes that might be rocks or robbers. You squint against the sun and pray your boots don't split halfway there. Each bump in the trail jostles your ribs like nature's cruel percussion section. You haven't even reached town, and already you've swallowed a fly and most of your pride. You pass other travelers, some on wagons, some walking, all looking like they regret life. One nods, another spits. You clutch your satchel tighter. There's no police here. If someone wants your coins or canned beans, it's a matter of who's faster on the draw. Historians still argue whether frontier towns promoted self-reliance or simply thrived on polite paranoia. You lean toward the latter, especially when you catch someone measuring your horse with their eyes. You finally reach town, a row of wooden buildings lining a dusty street, flanked by hitching posts and piles of questionable trash. There's a general store, a saloon, maybe a blacksmith, and, if you're lucky, a doctor who isn't currently drunk or out of leeches. Inside the general store, you browse barrels of flour, sacks of grain, canned meat, and pickles that might be older than your horse. Everything is overpriced. You barter with dry humor and nearly weep over a single fresh apple. The store smells like dust, candle wax, and something mildly rancid. You try not to gag. The store clerk glares like suspicion is his full-time job. You chat about crop yields, the latest local scandal, someone lost a goat and blamed it on ghosts, and a nearby feud escalating into shovel duels. You learn that 3 new settlers arrived last week and 2 already moved back east. Smart folks. Next stop, the saloon. You push open the swinging doors and step into chaos. It's dark, sticky, and loud. A piano plays in the corner while someone yells about poker hands. You order a drink, whiskey, obviously, and sip it while avoiding eye contact. The bartender is half asleep, the floors are half clean, and everyone is fully armed. Saloon culture isn't glamorous. You're mostly trying to sit without catching anything contagious. The bar smells of sweat, stale booze, and lost hopes. A man stumbles out of the restroom, a wooden box with a bucket, muttering about phantom cattle. You decide you're done drinking. Law enforcement? Maybe. there's a man with a badge asleep on the porch, one boot off, the other full of peanut shells. You whisper a quiet prayer that you don't need him tonight. Shopping done, gossip absorbed, you pack your goods and prepare for the ride back. You hesitate. Something feels off. The wind shifts. A dog growls in the distance. You sense tension in the air. You check your pockets again. You ride home faster, eyes scanning the horizon for trouble. Luckily, you make it back unscathed. Physically, anyway. Mentally, you're wondering whether city life is all that bad. One quirky tidbit: some towns had petticoat governments, run entirely by women after the men either left or got themselves locked up. Progress or survival strategy? Still debated. As night falls, you store your goods and slump into a chair. Your back aches. Your horse pretends not to know you. But at least you made it through a frontier supply run. Barely. One more reminder: you definitely wouldn't survive a day in this era, especially with your modern coffee habit.
Today, you head to the mine. Why? Because poverty loves company, and this company pays in dust, injuries, and small hope. You're not even a full-time miner, just someone who needs enough silver or gold to keep your family alive another week. The West is full of promise, yes, but also full of shafts waiting to swallow you whole. Your boots crunch over gravel as you reach the entrance. It yawns like a hungry mouth. The tunnel is dark, damp, and smells like sweat baked into despair. You light your lantern and step in. The air cools quickly, and your breath fogs. You squeeze past twisted wood beams that keep the ceiling from collapsing, most days. Historians still argue whether mining was the frontier's economic backbone or its burial ground. Feels like both right now. Inside, you join a handful of workers. Some are coughing already. You pick up your pickaxe and begin chipping at the wall, hoping to strike something shiny before your lungs give up. The walls groan from pressure. The floor shudders occasionally. A tremor last week killed 3. No funeral, just closed the shaft and moved on. Every swing of your tool is heavy. Your arms burn. Dust clouds form with each strike, and you try not to breathe too deeply. Black lungs waiting in the wings. You wear a cloth mask, but it filters nothing. One miner jokes that coughing is the mine's love language. You laugh, then cough, then stop laughing. Time blurs. No lunch breaks, just bites of jerky between swings. If the vein collapses, you might be buried before you even hear it happening. It's not just mining that's risky. Getting paid is a gamble too. You're owed wages, but the company store wants it all back for overpriced supplies and meals that taste like punishment. Debt becomes a constant companion. You climb deeper. It gets hotter. Water drips from above, forming stagnant pools that breed God knows what. You pass graffiti from earlier workers. Names, prayers, crude jokes. One reads, "Tell Ma I'm still diggin'." It's half smeared, like someone tried to erase hope. Tools break often. You shout for help and wait. Time stretches. Someone above drops a new pick down, a jagged clank in the silence. You keep going. You found nothing yet, just rocks, fatigue, and anxiety gnawing at the corners of your thoughts. The light from your lantern flickers. You check your oil, half full, or half empty, depending on your mood. Then you hear it, a loud crack. The ground shifts, rocks tumble from above, a cascade of chaos. You dodge left. Dust clouds blind you, screams echo. When it clears, you're alive, but 2 men aren't. One buried waist deep, another missing. You dig fast, frantic. You free one, The other, still missing. That's the mine. No ceremony, no rest, just a crude roll call and guesses about body recovery. Management shrugs. Dangerous business, they say. You say nothing. You just keep swinging. You finally emerge, staggering into sunlight. You squint. You're covered in grime. Your ears ring. Your hands tremble. A child runs past, laughing. You envy their clean air. You spit. Your saliva is gritty. You're 35 and feel 80. Quirky tidbit? Some miners used canaries to detect deadly gases. Smart, but tragic. The bird dies before you do. The West was always pragmatic and brutal. You walk back to your shack with half a sack of dirt and the faint hope there's something precious inside it. Your back aches. Your spirit limps. Another day, another scrape with oblivion. If you think this is a rough job, don't worry. Tomorrow you get to try farming.
Morning greets you with the brutal honesty of cracked soil and no sign of rain. Today's challenge? Farming. That word may evoke images of rolling fields, golden wheat, and happy cows. But here, it's sun-scorched dirt, insects that bite, and crops that treat you like an unwanted guest. You head outside with a hoe so rusted it looks more decorative than functional. The ground fights you. It's dry, stubborn, and littered with rocks left by generations of passive-aggressive tectonic activity. Your crops, if you can call them that, are skeletal stalks clinging to survival like dramatic soap opera characters. The frontier promised fertile land, but forgot to mention locusts, droughts, and soil that holds grudges. You dig furrows by hand, sweat pouring into your eyes, and finally drop in some seeds. Corn, maybe. Beans, if you're lucky. Nothing too fancy, because you're not farming for culinary adventure, you're farming to eat and not die. Historians still argue whether the Homestead Act genuinely benefited small farmers or simply baited them into debt and misery. You start to suspect it was the latter. You've got a small patch growing, kind of, except the deer have noticed. The rabbits have noticed. Even your neighbor's goat seems interested. Fences? Wobbly. Scarecrow? Unconvincing. You wave your arms and yell like a mad person while they nibble your survival chances. Then there's irrigation. You don't have fancy pumps. You fill buckets from a creek 2 miles away and slosh your way across ant-filled terrain. By the time you reach your plot, the water is half gone, your boots are squishy, and your knees hate you. Farming here isn't seasonal. It's relentless. There's planting, weeding, praying, and panicking. You use manure as fertilizer, but applying it means you smell like lost hope for hours. Pests laugh at your efforts. Aphids turn leaves into lace. Grasshoppers party on your potatoes. You try homemade remedies. Ashes, vinegar, desperation. Mixed results. When harvest time comes, you kneel among the rows, fingers blistered, back screaming. The yield? Meager. Some corn, a few beans, a squash shaped like a mistake. You calculate whether it'll last through winter and quietly rehearse crying in case it doesn't. What about storage? You dig a root cellar, which promptly leaks. You pickle what you can, dry what you can't, and pray that mold takes a vacation this year. Rats visit nightly. You set traps and discover one chewing on a pumpkin like it owes rent. Quirky tidbit? Frontier cookbooks included recipes for baked prairie dog. That's right, you're one culinary disaster away from cooking rodents. Your ancestors were either resilient or had very forgiving stomachs. Oh, and you owe taxes. Didn't harvest enough? Tough. The county wants payment anyway. You offer potatoes? They prefer coins. You consider selling a goat? Then remember it's emotionally attached to your porch. There's no insurance, no subsidies, no emergency hotline, just you, the field, and nature's casual cruelty. You read somewhere that farmers are eternal optimists. You're trying. Between muttering curses at a worm that ruined your best cabbage. Sometimes the sky darkens and rain falls. You dance in it, literally. You laugh, spin, slip in mud, and land flat on your dignity. Doesn't matter. The crops drink it up. For one moment, hope glimmers. But as sun sets, you count your harvest, count your coin, count your remaining patience. Farming in the Wild West isn't feeding your soul, it's draining your spinal fluid. You wouldn't survive a week of this. Honestly, the crops have more grit than you. You wake with the scent of sweat and saddle leather wafting through your crooked window. Today, you're ranching. Sounds rugged and romantic, right? Well, buckle up. Ranching is a full-body betrayal wrapped in cow poop and sleep deprivation. You start by wrangling cattle that have no respect for your personal space. They moo like they're filing complaints. You slap on your boots, still damp from yesterday, and step into a corral that doubles as a mud pit. One cow stares you down like it knows you were vegetarian once. You grab a lasso and try your best to look like you know what you're doing. Spoiler, the cows know you don't. Branding is on the agenda today. You heat the iron till it glows, then hold it steady while someone corners a squirming calf. The smell of burnt hair and flesh fills the air. Not exactly the romance of the frontier brochure they gave you back east. Historians still argue whether branding was more about ownership or intimidation. Either way, the calf isn't impressed. Your hands shake as you work, the sun climbs higher, the temperature passes the crispy human threshold. Your shirt sticks to your back, your hat no longer helps, and you've consumed more dust than nutrition. One quirky tidbit: ranchers used to mark their territory with carved rocks called cowstones, basically prehistoric signage for bovine real estate. The cattle aren't just a job, they're a problem with hooves. They wander into rivers, escape fences, fight with neighbors' cows, and get stolen. Rustlers roam the land like discount villains, and unless you're armed and awake 24/7, your herd might vanish overnight. You ride the fence line, checking for breaks, spotting hoof prints, maybe noticing the telltale signs of a human footprint that doesn't belong. Horseback? Sure. Until your horse decides you're annoying and gallops into a ditch. You fall, hit every rock known to science, and land with the elegance of a sack of flour. There's no ambulance. You pop your shoulder back in and scream quietly and keep riding. Meal breaks don't exist. You eat jerky from your saddlebag, tough, salty, suspiciously similar to the leather you're sitting on. Your water's warm, your lips are cracked. You hope for shade, find a cactus. It pokes you for asking. And sleep? Forget it. Night shifts are real. Coyotes stalk the pasture. Bandits test their luck. Lightning ignites distant hills. You keep one eye open and a shotgun nearby. You hear a moo and jump like it's a battle cry. The psychological toll sneaks in. You're alone more than you'd like, talking to animals more than people. You whisper to the wind. It doesn't respond, but it definitely mocks you. Ranch life is like a test nobody trained you for, and failure means starvation. The economic pressure builds too. Cattle prices fluctuate, storms destroy property, Banks demand payment. You feel a constant weight on your shoulders, and it's not just your saddle. You finish branding, mending fences, counting cows, and hauling feed. You smell awful. Your hands bleed. Your boots squish ominously. Ranching isn't a lifestyle. It's a full-time fight against nature, theft, and exhaustion. But you do get one victory. You wrangled a rogue steer that tried to leap into a canyon. You tie him up, stare into his eyes, and silently beg him to chill. He snorts. You pat his neck. He doesn't kill you. That's a win. You head back to the shack with a limp and the kind of sunburn that could be studied by scientists. You lean against the porch, stare at the stars, and wonder if the cows are planning an uprising. They probably are. Ranching in the Wild West is brutal, and you're one blister away from surrender.
You wake to the rhythmic creak of a spinning wheel and the distant clang of someone struggling with laundry. Today, you live the Wild West life as a woman. Fair warning, equal opportunity isn't really a phrase the 1870s understood. Your day isn't just packed. It's a relentless loop of labor, exhaustion, and societal expectations stacked like unwashed dishes. You start by tending to breakfast. That means grinding flour, stoking the fire, boiling water, and trying not to inhale soot. You make biscuits that could double as paperweights, and eggs that were stolen from an angry chicken at 5 a.m. Everyone eats first. You eat later, if anything's left. Then it's laundry. You haul water from the well, again, and scrub clothes against a metal washboard while your knuckles protest. Soap is handmade. Your fingers crack and bleed. But don't worry, you'll still have to fix dinner later. Sew clothes, mend boots, watch children, sweep, scrape, milk, knit, churn, and, if there's a spare moment, deliver a baby in the pantry. Historians still argue whether frontier women gained independence through hardship or simply bore more weight than society admitted. You feel the independence in your aching spine. Want quirky? Women on the frontier sometimes used roasted dandelion roots as coffee. Not because it tasted good, because they ran out of actual coffee in 1863 and refused to admit defeat. You're not just a homemaker. You're a nurse, farmer, teacher, builder, and, when necessary, gunslinger. When your husband is away, you run the farm. If someone threatens your home, you shoot. You patch up injuries with herbs and instinct. The nearest doctor is 3 towns over, probably drunk, and thinks leeches solve everything. Pregnancy? It's not pastel announcements and baby showers. You give birth after a day of hauling wood, surrounded by neighbors with towels and whiskey. There's no anesthesia, no epidural, just grit and God. Childcare is woven into chores. You strap a baby to your hip while stirring stew and yelling at goats. Toddlers wander freely. You try to teach letters between sweeping and fixing a broken door hinge. If one falls ill, you administer onion poultices and prayers. Sometimes they work. Your clothing? Corsets, long skirts, and boots designed by someone who clearly hated mobility. You trip over hems, sweat through petticoats, and still get judged if you don't smile while doing it. Social status isn't fixed. If you're lucky, your town respects your contributions. If not, you're just the wife. Widows often became business owners or landholders, because they had no choice. But single women? Treated with suspicion, whispers, or matchmaking attempts fueled by gossip and desperation. You hear rumors of mail-order brides, women shipped west like parcels to marry strangers. Some found love, others found regret in a dusty shack with 4 kids and a cow named Disappointment. Despite everything, women form quiet networks. Neighbors help each other with childbirth, food shortages, grief. Letters travel between towns with recipes, advice, and rants about husbands who can't find the axe they misplaced themselves. Dinner approaches. You've cooked, cleaned, comforted, defended, and negotiated. You still haven't sat down. Your hair is a haystack. Your hands are raw. Your spirit is fraying like the hem of your only dress. You tuck in the children, patch a hole in the roof, and stare at the stars. You're tired, sore, and ignored, but you kept everyone alive. The Wild West didn't reward women, it tested them. And you wouldn't last a sunrise.
You walk into town under the faded sun, boots kicking up dust, hoping for a quiet day. But this time, you're not just any settler. You're one of the others. Maybe you're Chinese, Mexican, black, or native. And in the Wild West of the 1870s, that identity paints a target on your back the size of the prairie. You arrive with caution. Eyes follow you. Conversations hush. That saloon you passed earlier? You're not welcome there. The barber shop? Nope. General store? Maybe, if you bring exact change and keep your voice low. Your very existence makes people nervous, even though you're just trying to survive like everyone else. Let's say you're Chinese. You probably helped build the railroad, breaking rocks and laying steel in back-breaking conditions for less pay than your white counterparts. Your bunk is overcrowded. Your food is sparse. You're blamed for diseases when others get sick. Someone called you coolie this morning, like it's a nickname, not a slur. Or maybe you're Mexican American. Your family's owned this land since before it was the United States. But new settlers don't care. They treat you like a stranger in your own backyard. Property disputes escalate fast. One shove, one gunshot, one headline no one investigates. Historians still argue whether land grants and cultural rights were respected or railroaded by legal trickery and brute force. If you're African American, you might have come west hoping for freedom post-Civil War. Some towns offer opportunity, others don't even allow you past sundown. You might live in a black enclave like Nicodemus, Kansas, where hope flickers despite the odds, but violence and racism still lurk behind seemingly peaceful streets. Quirky fact for today. Some Chinese immigrants in frontier towns ran laundries and restaurants that became local favorites, though they were still targets of legislation and organized boycotts. Frontier economics didn't always care about justice, just profit. Daily life for you means tiptoeing around threats. You want a ranch? Someone questions your papers. Want a mine? You get the shaft no one else wants. Farming? Good luck getting seed loans. You live under suspicion, and there's little recourse. Local lawmen don't rush to help. If anything, they may make things worse. Discrimination isn't just personal, it's systemic. You hear of towns passing foreign miners tax or banning non-white residents entirely. Posters announce dances for whites only. Churches might let you in, maybe, through the back. You listen to sermons on love while sitting outside. You build community anyway. Your neighbors rally. You create spaces, hidden, resilient, powerful. You host festivals, preserve language, raise children to know their worth despite the world's dismissal. Culture becomes resistance, and whispered songs shared over lantern light feel like sacred rebellion. Yet, danger is constant. One wrong word, one accusation, and mobs form. Your home burns. You flee. The sheriff shrugs. Justice isn't blind. It's just not looking at you. But you endure. You work. You survive, even as the West tells you you're not supposed to. You carve out a life from splinters and grit. You help build towns, lay rail, raise cattle, and feed people. Without you, the frontier collapses, but history barely mentions your name. As you return home, the sun dips below the hills. You watch it fade, just like the acknowledgement of your struggle. You rest your hands on the fence you built yourself, knowing no plaque will bear your name. But you lived. You loved. You fought. The Wild West wasn't built on rugged individualism. It leaned heavily on ignored labor, erased stories, and daily courage from people history tried to forget. And you wouldn't last a week in their shoes, maybe not even a day. You wake to the distant sound of drumming, or maybe gunfire. In the Wild West of the 1870s, it's hard to tell. Today, you're not just a settler or laborer. You're living on land that's contested, haunted by broken treaties and smoldering tension. The landscape you step into is riddled with stories, some told, many silenced. You hitch up the wagon. You've got chores, errands, maybe a visit to the trading post. But you also know the trails are risky. That patch of forest over the hill, sacred territory. That dry riverbed, site of a skirmish just weeks ago. You feel the weight in your gut, the knowledge that you're part of a system unraveling something ancient. Let's be honest, you're on indigenous land. You were probably granted a plot under the Homestead Act, a government promise carved out of someone else's homeland. Tribes displaced from their ancestral territory now linger on edges or march across continents, pressed by soldiers and settlers alike. Some have treaties, most broken. Some resist, most cornered. Historians still argue whether these treaties were strategic compromises or tools of deliberate dispossession. You see both in the lines of your map. You pass a native encampment on the horizon. Tents, smoke, silence. You don't wave. They don't wave back. The tension simmers like a kettle with no whistle. Some days, relations are peaceful. Trading, shared resources. Other days, someone vanishes. The mood turns. Militia rumors buzz like flies. It's impossible to relax. What a quirky fact. Some frontier towns held peace feasts, where settlers and native leaders gathered for food and dialogue. These often ended with hopeful speeches and deep mutual suspicion. The West loved symbols, but rarely the substance behind them. Conflict isn't always open. Sometimes it's whispers. A ranch burned, a wagon raided, children gone missing. Stories spread fast, often distorted. One settler claims a native warrior cursed his crops. Another insists he saw scalp dances. Truth blends with fear. Fear breeds action. You build a fence. You dig a ditch.
You sleep with a rifle near the door, not just for coyotes anymore. Your neighbor offers advice. Don't trust anyone without boots. Not helpful, but okay. For Native Americans, this decade is one of heartbreak and resistance. Leaders like Sitting Bull, Geronimo, and Chief Joseph fight for dignity and survival. Forced removals continue. Boarding schools open, designed to erase language and culture. The buffalo vanish. Livelihoods collapse. There's grief, yes, but also defiance. You witness this, partly. You hear songs at dusk from far-off hills. You catch fragments of conversations in languages you don't understand. You know there's beauty, but also pain, and you're complicit, just by standing on this soil. Trade still happens. You swap pelts for cornmeal, learn a few words, share awkward smiles. Some settlers see humanity, others see threat. The West isn't uniform. It's chaotic, splintered, volatile. You hear of skirmishes, some sparked by livestock, others by insults. Forts rise along rivers bristling with uneasy soldiers. Outlaws exploit the chaos. Politicians send ambiguous orders from hundreds of miles away. The press spins tales with more drama than truth. Eventually, your town votes to build a wall, or post guards, or draft a militia. You don't argue. Survival trumps ethics. But you know, deep down, that history will not be kind to your silence. The Wild West isn't just about cowboys and gold. It's built on buried bones and broken promises. You feel the weight. You can't ignore it. Every fence you build whispers, this land was already claimed. As the sun sets, you hear that distant drumming again. Maybe celebration, maybe mourning. You pull your blanket tight and listen, hoping tomorrow is quieter. You wouldn't survive this delicate balancing act, not without guilt, not without consequences. The sun slides across the sky like an overworked bartender, and you find yourself squinting at the crooked wooden building marked Sheriff. Today's adventure is law and order, or more accurately, the flimsy illusion of it. In the Wild West of the 1870s, justice is often improvised, occasionally drunk, and frequently missing altogether. You push open the sheriff's door. He's asleep at his desk, hat over his eyes, one boot off, the other being gnawed by a bored dog. A wanted poster flutters nearby, hand-drawn, no photo, just vague threats and a reward that won't be paid. You ask a question and get a grunt. That's about the level of public service available. The town jail is minimal. One cell, one key, and a door held shut more by shame than engineering. The bars rattle when you breathe near them. Last week, someone escaped by sneezing too hard. Historians still argue whether Western lawmen truly upheld justice or simply performed authority when convenient. You lean toward the performance side when the sheriff offers you the key and mutters, "You handle it." Crime here isn't just theft and murder, it's everyday chaos. Fist fights over poker games, property disputes that escalate into duels, a chicken stolen and blamed on local witchcraft. Your neighbor's goat went missing, and she swears it was abducted by a man with 17 teeth and 0 regrets. If you're robbed, good luck. You track the thief yourself, maybe enlist a posse if they're sober and bored. Trials are rare. Hangings, sometimes public entertainment. And if the law is the outlaw's cousin, well, that's just awkward. Quirky tidbit. Some towns elected sheriffs based on shooting contests, or bar brawling skill, not exactly legal credentials. You can lose an election for being too literate and win it by out-drinking the deputy. You visit the saloon. A fight breaks out before you sit down. Someone insults someone's horse. Someone else throws a bottle. Chairs fly. You dodge a spittoon and decide maybe law isn't just missing, it's actively avoiding you. Property disputes get nasty. Land markers vanish. Livestock crosses lines. Someone draws a gun because a fence leaned too far east. You hide behind a barrel and wonder if city life was really that bad. And if you're unlucky, vigilante justice kicks in. Mob rule, torch-lit committees. Someone's accused of something they maybe didn't do. Evidence? Optional. People gather. Shouts rise. You slink away before things escalate. You weren't trained for ethical dilemmas in the middle of nowhere. And even when the sheriff's awake, the legal system is slippery. You present a complaint. He listens. He nods. He asks if you can prove it in blood, gold, or at least a compelling limerick. You offer a witness, who now mysteriously ain't in town no more. Law varies by location. In one town, gambling's banned. In the next, it's a civic duty. One outlaw is wanted in 3 territories, but celebrated in 2. You read a local ordinance that says horses can't wear hats. You blink, move on. Sometimes justice is personal. You defend your land, your goods, your dignity. You carry a gun because the sheriff might not. You learn quick, justice isn't served, it's scavenged. You patch wounds before pressing charges. The psychological toll is subtle. You live in low-grade paranoia. Every knock on the door could be trouble. Every stranger might be a threat. You sleep with one eye open and one boot on. You memorize escape routes. You stop trusting open smiles. Eventually, you accept the truth. You're the sheriff now, or the guard, or the lawyer. There's no law in the West, just people pretending hard enough to keep things stable. You wouldn't survive this spaghetti tangle of power, fear, and improvisation, not without accidentally becoming an outlaw yourself.
You shuffle into the saloon, expecting a cinematic spectacle. Maybe you're picturing velvet-clad piano players, glinting glasses of bourbon, and mysterious strangers with hearts of gold. But the Wild West doesn't play by Hollywood script, and the saloon is more grime than glamour. The doors swing behind you with a groan, not a dramatic flare. Inside, the air is a cocktail of stale tobacco, spilled whiskey, body odor, and something unspeakably sticky. Your boots stick to the floor, literally. You take 2 steps and gain a new layer of regret on your soles. Every table is carved with initials, bad poetry, or crude doodles of cows. You grab a stool at the bar and nod to the barkeep. He grunts. You ask for whiskey. He pours you something amber, smoky, and probably 30% furniture polish. You sip. It burns like betrayal. At another table, a man burps loud enough to offend passing coyotes. Forget the duel at high noon, that's mostly myth. Historians still argue whether these gunfights actually happened regularly or were just exaggerated by dime novels looking for sales and scandal. Most frontier violence didn't involve heroic last stands. It was messy, fast, and often over absolutely nothing. You hear of a man stabbed over a hat, another shot because his mule farted too loudly during church. Quirky tidbit? Some saloons had sawdust on the floor, not for style, but to soak up drinks, spit, and occasional blood. One even boasted a pet bear. That's right, a bear.
Drunk, probably. Possibly unionized. Entertainment? A piano that wheezes through every note. Occasionally a lady sings, voice raw, dress frayed, eyes distant. Her name's probably Miss Bonnie or Miss Rose. She's charming, sharp-tongued, and tired of cowboys asking for songs they can't afford. She gives you a nod, you tip your hat. That's the highlight of your night. A poker game starts. The players look like they haven't smiled in decades. One man has 6 fingers. Another smells like onions and poor decisions. You sit, you lose, you question your life. The cards feel like sandpaper. Someone accuses someone else of cheating. They're shouting. You step away before the furniture joins in. And the violence? Never predictable. A glass shatters, someone's thrown outside. No one rushes to help. The sheriff doesn't show. He's busy sleeping off yesterday. You check your boots, still sticky. Probably just going to accept that as part of your identity now. Outside, people stagger under the moonlight. Some arguing, some singing, all slightly filthy. The town's quiet from a distance, but up close, chaos with a twang. Lawless moments bubble beneath daily life. You hear tales of bounty hunters who took down 6 men with a frying pan, of women who ran brothels and banks with equal flair, of dance halls where a shot of whiskey came with unsolicited poetry. Frontier nightlife wasn't glamorous. It was survival with music. Inside the saloon, you watch as a drunk man attempts to duel a mirror. He loses. You step out, eyes blurry, wallet emptier, pride somewhere under the spittoon. Gunfights? Sure, they happen, but not like the movies. No clean draw, no clever lines. Just noise, panic, and someone limping into the alley muttering, "I told her I didn't like cornbread." The West thrived on myths, but lived in mess. Saloon life was less epic showdown and more bacterial slip and slide. And you wouldn't survive an evening here, let alone a gunfight, especially in those clean sneakers.
You stand on a ridge, boots sinking slightly into dry soil, gazing at an expanse that feels eerily quiet. The prairie stretches out like a ghost story, and tonight's headline, "Where have all the buffalo gone?" Once this land thundered with herds, millions strong. Dust storms rose in their wake, the ground shook beneath their hooves, and their presence fed entire ecosystems. Now, silence. A handful of bones scattered near a dried-up streambed. The buffalo are gone. Extinct? Not quite, but close enough for grief. In the 1870s, westward expansion didn't just cost lives, it cost balance. Settlers, railroads, and market hunters went on buffalo killing sprees. Sometimes it was for meat, sometimes hides, sometimes just to drive out native populations who depended on these animals for food, clothing, tools, and ceremony. Historians still argue whether this was strategic genocide or uncontrolled industrial frenzy. Either way, the outcome was devastating. Want quirky? Some trains offered buffalo shooting excursions, where passengers fired rifles from moving cars. That's right, cattle murder as tourism. You imagine tourists today photographing squirrels. Now imagine them obliterating entire species for sport and headlines. As the buffalo disappeared, everything shifted. Native communities lost their food source, their culture fractured, and hunger became constant. Traditions tied to migration, hunt ceremonies, and storytelling faded, replaced by the grim reality of reservations and government rations. Tribes who had thrived for centuries faced starvation and forced assimilation, while buffalo skulls piled up in grotesque monuments to expansion. You step over a bone, it crunches faintly, a reminder of the cost. Settlers noticed too. The grasses changed, prairie dogs vanished, even predator behavior shifted. Without the buffalo's influence, the landscape became unstable. Dust storms grew more violent, rivers changed course, and without the hooved migration to aerate soil, farming turned harder. You hear old men talk about the buffalo days. Their eyes glaze over like faded oil paintings. You ask if they ever saw one? Once, one says. They moved like rivers. You nod, trying to picture it, but you can't. The silence is louder than any thunder. Some pushed for conservation, voices lost in the noise of industry. Others didn't notice the extinction until it impacted their wallets. You smell nostalgia in the air, mixed with manure and disappointment. Occasionally, you stumble on a taxidermied buffalo in someone's barn. It looks wrong, lifeless, a frozen echo of something sacred. You touch it, and it's cold. It's no substitute for 40 million heartbeats galloping across the plains. You sit by the fire that night, thinking. You understand now. Removing one creature reshaped the West like a careless sculptor. The buffalo weren't just animals. They were culture, climate, rhythm, identity. You wouldn't survive the fallout. Not the hunger. Not the silence. Not the guilt. You stare at the horizon, and it's not wild anymore. Railroads cut through once vast plains like steel veins. Telegraph wires hum above your shack. Something's shifting, and it's not just the dust beneath your boots. The frontier is morphing into something colder, louder, and distinctly corporate. You see trains now, long ones, heavy, carrying not just settlers but supplies, lumber, livestock, and ledgers. The age of the lone trapper is fading fast, replaced by businessmen with briefcases and banknotes. Towns are formalizing. Streets get names. Governments send inspectors. Suddenly, there are rules, too many of them. Banks arrive with mortgage offers. You squint at the papers, unsure what half the words mean. You sign anyway. Later, they say you're late on a payment. You argue. They shrug. You lose a piece of land that once fed your kids. Historians still argue whether frontier capitalism empowered settlers or exploited them into silence. You suspect the second, especially when your neighbor's farm gets bought out by a smiling man with a gold watch. Quirky tidbit: some companies created company towns in the West, complete with housing, stores, and churches, all owned by the business. Workers were paid in tokens, redeemable only at the company store. Freedom? Technically, but not really. Even ranching changes. Corporate cattle drives replace family herds. Fences go up. Land, once open to all, now bears signs like private property or McCullough and Sons. You used to trade with neighbors. Now you negotiate with agents. Some settlers succeed. Others fall behind. The social divide widens fast. There's a new kind of outlaw, fraudsters with suits instead of 6 shooters. You get offers to sell your land for progress. You decline. they pressure harder. Justice improves somewhat. Town halls form, courts open, but litigation becomes the new duel. You hire a lawyer. You lose. You swear revenge, but now it's just a long line of paperwork and misery. Technology whispers promise. Railroads bring goods faster. Telegraphs connect news across states. You see a sewing machine. It feels like magic. You hear rumors of electricity. A traveling salesman shows you canned peaches. You cry a little. But it's not all peachy. Your way of life shrinks. Independence, once your pride, feels boxed in by contracts, regulations, and late fees. The West isn't wild, it's taxable. You watch your town expand. Churches, hotels, schools. Good changes, yes, but also unfamiliar. Cultures blend, but without tension. Mexican families clash with Anglo officials. Chinese workers are displaced again. Native lands vanish into grid plans. You speak up. They call you quaint. One woman opens a newspaper. She's brilliant, fiery, tired of corruption. Her editorials spark debate, but she's silenced eventually. You hear about it from a whispering bartender. You walk the town one last time. There is a bank where a buffalo once grazed, a billboard where your tree used to grow. Children chase balls, not rabbits. You nod. You accept. The Wild West isn't gone. It evolved. You're not sure where you fit anymore. You still hold a knife at your belt, but now you mostly use it to open envelopes. You miss the silence. You fear the noise. The horizon still stretches far, but it feels managed. You wouldn't survive this new era either, not without surrendering something vital.
So now, as we tiptoe out of this dust-soaked journey, take a long, slow breath. Picture yourself under a star-splashed sky. Not the glow of city lights, but real, wild darkness. There's no rumble of traffic here, just the occasional rustle of dry grass, the creak of wind against wood, and your thoughts moving like slow tumbleweeds. The people of the Wild West endured more than Hollywood ever lets on. Not just shootouts and saloons, but relentless labor, sickness, heat, hunger, grief, injustice. And somehow, they built lives, homes, stories, futures. Each crack in the soil carried hope, even when it didn't bloom. You've traveled through their struggles tonight, dodged rattlesnakes, wrestled cows, whispered lullabies to storm-battered roofs. You've seen the grit behind the myth, the tear-stained resilience wrapped in bandanas and stubbornness. Let that settle in as your mind quiets. There's courage in exhaustion. There's dignity in dirty boots. And there's beauty in a land so wild it reshaped history, culture, and imagination. Now, lay back. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the West drift off your shoulders. The wind hums a lullaby through sagebrush. The stars whisper, Rest now. Tomorrow, you can be a pioneer in your own way.